Welcome to Reynolds Reviews, where we review a wide variety of products and supplies. Be sure to hit that subscribe button on the way in so that you don't miss any of our future videos. And if you've got a personal experience with the products or supplies that we covered in this video, be sure to leave your personal experience down below in the comments. As always, links to all products and supplies will be available in the description box below.
So in today's video, I'm going to be showing you how to cut plywood without a table saw. I've not used this tool before, so let's go ahead and unbox it so that we can see exactly what we've got here. All right, so now that I've installed it, I can give you a quick rundown of how this thing goes. So as you can see, it's got three basic parts that come in the package. One is going to be this long blue piece here, and you've got the metal piece here, and another blue piece, which is actually the portion that the saw is attached to. So we've got two screws here, see if I can hold it this way, that attaches the metal to this blue plastic piece here. This is the part that rides along the edge of the material that you're cutting. And then this is actually the sled. I believe this is the sled for the saw. In any case, this one is clamped down to the circular saw, and it's got two clamps here that can be adjusted so that this will fit most saws. After I tightened it down some, it's not moving at all, so I feel secure with moving forward with it. It also has a plate here that goes on the side so that you can remove the saw and put it back on here the exact same way that you set it up initially. That will be awesome for when you're going to be taking the saw off and putting this away for storage. You can always go back and your settings and everything will be the exact same way that you had them prior to putting it away. Now, another cool feature that this Ripcut has is that it has a red line mark here so that you can make fine-tune adjustments to make sure that your blade is lined up with your line that you've made here on your material. I'm also going to adjust the height of the saw so that I don't cut through my makeshift table underneath this plywood, because essentially what I'm going to be doing is setting this thing up and getting it ready to go, and then just sliding it all the way across. All right, let's check my work and see how well I did. That looks pretty good to me. As you can see, it's pretty consistent there. You can see my blue line there. I left the line on this piece here, and we can pretty consistently see that blue line all the way across this board. And so we made a pretty consistent cut there, and that's not bad for a first try. So I had a few little hiccups there along the way, but I'm going to share a couple of pointers in case you choose to get this particular product. All right, folks, so I have to say that this tool performed pretty well. A couple pointers that I want to make sure to drive home is that when you've got this saw on the sled setup and you're preparing to make your cut, the main thing that you want to make sure is that your blade is lined up with the little red line portion here on the front of the saw. Let's see if I can do this. Before I do that, I'll pull my battery out here so we can handle this thing freely. So if I hold the saw up like this, you can see that there is a red line here, and this piece of plastic moves independently from this piece of metal so that you can make sure that you line up your cut point right here with the blade on the saw. And you can look through the opening here and make sure that everything is lined up before you begin cutting. So that is one huge piece of advice and tip to keep in mind. The other thing that you want to keep in mind the entire time that you're cutting is that you want to make sure that you've got this piece of the sled pushed jam up against the board here. And that can be a little bit difficult to get started back here because you don't have anything to make sure that it's lined up and square up against, but just make sure that you're providing even pressure against it as you slide the saw along, because if you've got a sharp blade on your saw, the saw is going to cut through the plywood no problem. So as long as you're holding the blade down or holding your button down to keep the blade engaged, you're fine over here. You want to mainly focus on keeping the saw flat on the material that you're cutting and keeping this jam up against the side of the material here, right here. And so as it slides along, you just want to make sure that you're keeping everything consistent. Another thing that you want to make sure of, and you may have seen it in my recording, is that you want to make sure that the surface that you're cutting on is also smooth, because there's a few points where the sled here got bound up on some of this OSB that is beginning to come apart. And I had to stop and back up and remove a piece, or just back up and slide forward again to make it move. And that's not what you want to get into when you're trying to make a very smooth cut. As you can see, this cut is actually pretty smooth, and it came out pretty much as good as I could have hoped for. Additionally, you want to make sure that both sides of the board are supported, because if you don't, then you could run the risk of this thing pinching on the front or in the back, or the board beginning to drop down and bind on the saw, all of which can be potentially dangerous situations. So as you can see here, I made my cut all the way through, but both pieces of the board are still on top of the table and very well supported. This piece of board has still got quite a bit of table underneath it. It's actually completely on the table pretty much. So it's just something else to keep in mind as you're doing this. One more thing to keep in mind is when you get to the end of your board, it can be a little bit more difficult to make the saw pass all the way through, because you still have the sled attached and the saw is back here. And so once you get to the point where you're trying to bring the saw all the way through the material, you're going to have to try to hold the sled back here to make sure that you can cut all the way through the end at the depth that you need. So I had to make 3 or 4 passes to make sure that I got to the end of it and cut through clean, but it ended up not being a big deal. It did not mess up my cut. So I think those are the main pointers to take away. As I will also say that there's no way that I could have cut this board in half like this with this type of uniform results doing it by hand. I'm not someone that uses a circular saw every day, and I'm sure that there are people out there who can rip this thing in seconds, almost just eyeballing the board. I'm not in that club, and if you're not either, then you probably want to look at getting a tool like this, and it actually comes off and slides off pretty easily. You just disengage it right here, and then you slide this portion out, and you're back broken down. This portion here comes off as well. So you have to unscrew or back out these screws here slightly to loosen it up, and then you're good to go. You're back to just having your regular saw the way you normally use it. So I'm going to go ahead and just do that real quickly just to demonstrate. And taking it apart, and we're back to just having our regular circular saw. One other thing that I wanted to mention is that with the housing on this, you want to make sure that you've got a good fit on your saw. As I said, when I set mine up, I was able to tighten it down, and when I did that, it did not move at all. So let me just quickly show you a close-up of what these boards look like so that you can see you didn't have any type of binding or burning of the wood. It's just a straight, clean cut. All right, so this is what I wanted to show you, is just the edge here so you can see that it's clean, and it's clean all the way down. All right, so I've actually got to make 2 cuts. I only made 1, so let me hop right back out here and get this thing squared away. So previously, when I was showing you the pointers for what to do with regards to making your sled slide smoothly. I mentioned that I had an issue here with sliding the sled on rough surface. And so since I'm still cutting on the same surface here, which is this OSB, I am just going to hang the edge of my board off slightly, which is about 2 inches. This way I don't have to worry about the bottom of this portion of the sled getting bound up on some of the rough OSB that is starting to delaminate. So I'm gonna start back here. Everything's gonna be gone the exact same way. I'm gonna scoop my board back here, and then we'll just go ahead and slide forward. So as I said, we wanna make sure that we've got this pushed to the side here. Let's make sure we've got a tight fit. Engage the safety and the trigger, and let's go ahead and make this cut. See what we got. Okay. So we cut off this piece here, and again, still a pretty good cut here. You can see where my mark is here, my pin, and you can see that it's still, the majority of that pin mark is still on there. Okay, so now that I've made my cut, I can jump back to working on my project. Hopefully you found this video informative, and I will see you all on the next one.